When we hear the term Native Americans, we often imagine warriors wearing feathered headdresses. However, the reality is far more diverse and complex. Native Americans, also known as Indigenous Americans, are the people whose ancestors lived in the Americas thousands of years before Europeans arrived on the continent. They were the original inhabitants of America, and their presence on this land dates back many thousands of years. However, Native Americans were not a single race, language group, or culture. In fact, before the arrival of Europeans, hundreds of different tribes and communities lived across the Americas. Each tribe had its own unique language, traditions, religious beliefs, clothing, food, and way of life. For example, some tribes lived on the vast grasslands and relied on hunting bison for survival, while others lived in dense forests and practiced agriculture. Some communities lived along the coasts and depended on fishing, while others adapted to the harsh conditions of desert regions. This rich diversity made Native American societies incredibly varied, with each community developing its own distinct culture and traditions over thousands of years. Historians estimate that before Christopher Columbus arrived in the Americas in 1492, millions of Native Americans lived across the continent. According to various studies, their population may have ranged from 50 million to 60 million people, although historians continue to debate the exact numbers. This raises an interesting question. How did they come to be called Indians? In 1492, when Christopher Columbus crossed the Atlantic Ocean and reached the Americas, he mistakenly believed that he had arrived near India. Because of this misunderstanding, he began referring to the indigenous people he encountered as Indians. Later, it became clear that he had not reached India at all, but rather an entirely different continent. Nevertheless, the term American Indian remained in use for many centuries. Today, most people consider Native American, or indigenous peoples, to be more accurate and respectful terms. When it comes to identity, Native Americans did not see themselves as a single group with one common name. Instead, they identified themselves by the names of their own tribes and nations, such as the Cherokee, Navajo, Apache, Lakota, Sioux, and Iroquois. Each had its own unique culture, language, traditions, and history. Each of these groups had its own distinct identity. They spoke different languages, followed different traditions, and lived in different regions. Some tribes formed powerful alliances and confederacies, while others lived as small independent communities. These people also had a deep connection with nature. Nature played a very important role in the lives of Native Americans. They were deeply respectful of the natural world and lived in close harmony with it. They viewed the earth, rivers, forests, mountains, and animals not merely as resources, but as an essential part of their lives and existence. They believed that humans and nature are interconnected, and that maintaining balance between the two is essential. As a result, many of their religious beliefs, spiritual practices, and cultural traditions were based on respect for nature. Native Americans were the original inhabitants of the Americas, living on the continent for thousands of years before the arrival of Europeans. They were not a single people, but a vast collection of hundreds of different tribes and nations, each with its own language, culture, traditions, and way of life. Before European contact, they developed rich, diverse, and sophisticated societies across the American continents. It is important to understand that the story of Native Americans is not the story of one tribe or one culture, but the story of many peoples, nations, and civilizations whose histories together form an important part of the heritage of the Americas.